It's grand finals time for the Mythic Dungeon International as Method EU is going to be squaring off against Abrakeydabra. Starting us off is going to be the Motherlode, which Abra has just been absolutely living in throughout this tournament. Hello everyone, I'm Jack, and joining me for our action, we've got Sloops, Zyronic, and Tettles. And Tettles, we've seen so much action out of Abra, specifically into Motherlode, the double Unholy DK action in particular. They've got to be very well practiced going into this one.
Yeah, and I absolutely love that double Unholy DK. It's one of the adaptations we've actually seen from Abrakeydabra coming into those rogue nerfs that we've been seeing this week, so them utilizing that double Unholy DK in this Motherlode is very, very good by them.
And it's in particular the affixes with Fortified, Raging, Grievous. We've seen a couple times Ironic where it really limits where these guys are going to be able to pull, how many thugs they can get in as well.
Not only the thugs, but sometimes they pull extra Mage jockeys as well. And I mean, in this Raging affix, any of those grease guns, any of those clotheslines from the adult thugs, those can be just complete one-shots on players. So we'll have to keep an eye on what they're pulling and how they're dealing with that trash.
Well, we know we're going to have to look at what they're pulling, but as for their polling right now, Method EU's got that 59% favor as the grand finals is getting started right now.
Hopefully, Abrakeydabra was able to shake off some of the cobwebs from earlier in this dungeon because, I mean, they were handed quite the freebie, and they were lucky to get to this point based on their performance earlier on Motherlode. But it seems that they've kind of moved it up a bit. They did have a bit of a sloppy series I was watching in the back there while inhaling a most delicious sandwich, might I add, Zyro. But here we are yet again, Method EU and Abrakeydabra facing off for the second time this season in the grand final. The prophecy is reoccurring here, Zar. We're having exact same placements from the first cup, but can Abra take it over Method EU this time?
We'll have to see. I mean, we keep talking about Dr. J. Okay, yeah, the double Unholy DK just, there they go. That's the damage that Unholy DK does on massive AoE.
That's a thing.
That's fine. I mean, we keep talking about with Abrakeydabra the whole Dr. J and Mr. Hyde thing. This is the perfect example. Earlier on in the cup, they had a sub 19-minute Motherlode in here, which is blazing fast. It was a minute and a half faster than what we saw from any other team. And then, of course, earlier today we saw like a 26-minute Motherlode from them as well. So, I mean, if they get it together, they can put in an awesome run in this dungeon. We're just going to have to see how they're going to play. Now, they haven't popped their Bloodlust on this first pull, but we know from both of the runs they've done earlier this week and that they like using that Bloodlust on the first boss with some cleave. They pull some trash on top of the coin-operated crowd pummeler, and they let their Unholy DKs kind of do their thing.
Yeah, assuming nothing kills it on the way to the coin-operated capital. But we'll let Tettles talk about that one later. So Abrakeydabra here, 8% trash on the board versus 26% already from Method EU. Method EU is just blazing through this trash right now. Abrakeydabra didn't seem to really get the same value out of their Unholy DKs with their early on pull. However, they obviously did not do the same pull here. Well, they did not do the same side of the pull. They didn't even commit the Bloodlust to it. What are you thinking about there, Zyro?
Smock just walked right into the ground effect from the robots and just dazed himself for a little. He's walking in circles for a fine. I'm just giggling at that a little bit.
All right. Well, no, what's not funny is Ashton was getting one shot there by one of the mech jockeys right now as some more trash joins Abrakeydabra on top of it. Finally, they boost up to 21% while Method sits at 32%. Of course, we know very familiar with these dungeons that I would say the meta fit last season. The meta kind of tradition was to go through about 75 to 85% of the trash before the first boss. It seems some teams have pulled back a bit now because what they do is they deal with the drills after the coin-operated crowd pummeler, which seem to give about 3 and a bit % each, so fairly lucrative for the team. So you can expect that they're going to probably get in the mid-60s to 70% range before dealing with that first boss.
Yeah, and pretty much what that allows them to do is take out the super inefficient pulls in the start of the dungeon. Usually you're trying to pull as many of those mechanized peacekeepers as possible, and sometimes we would see them actually move on over to the left side of this initial part of the dungeon and do some less efficient pulls where they would only have one peacekeeper per pack. But usually what they're planning on doing on the right side, they get 1 or 2 in per pack and on this side of the dungeon. And for the side of Abrakeydabra, this pull specifically is the pull that we've seen teams this particular weekend wipe on more than anyone. There's 2 addled thugs in here, both of which, like we mentioned before the dungeon, have a chance to just pretty much one-shot any player should both of them charge at them. But if they get that Inhale Vapors off or they're in the Raging affix and they get that charge off, you're going to see somebody go from 100 to 0 instantly.
I did not know that those adult thugs vape, but that is good to know, and now we all know together. Abrakeydabra, 36 indeed, already starting to respect the danger of the trash, and you can see that adult thug on the left side there is glowing red from the fact that he cast the Inhale Vapors, which gives you 50% increased damage, plus the 100% damage increase from the Raging. As Zyra mentioned, that is an easy one-shot on a non-tank, so just making sure that nobody gets hit by that as Divine Field's running around, making sure to bait all of these zones on the side, and keeping his distance from these Peacekeepers just giving Zmok a chance to soothe them. You can see one of them has been soothed in the back there, as he does not have that kind of a berserking symbol above him. Now, Soothe being on a 10-second CD, you're going to have to wait a fair bit before you can re-engage safely as the tank. Speaking of safety, his tank now dips down to 35%. He as well starts kiting away from the trash.
I mean, it's important to mention the kiting here is absolutely necessary when they're in that Raging Affix, because I've seen too many death logs, especially from this week of MDI, where you've seen a tank die in like 0.2 seconds from 2 charged claws and 2 melees at the exact same time. Just 100 to 0 through all their mitigation, a ridiculous amount of damage. So they don't want to be anywhere near those 3 Peacekeepers when they're raging. And I mean, pretty much perfect kiting done from both Now and Divine Field. And this is the pull we were talking about for Abrakeydabra, where they pull an entire trash pull on top of the coin-operated crowd pummeler. And they're waiting on the list right now, but they want to have it up for when they have that damage amplification on the boss.
Speaking of lust, there it goes right now, just as you called it. Coin-operated crowd pummeler engaged here for Abrakeydabra, who's only 4% behind trash compared to Method EU now. So it was looking a bit daunting there at the beginning of the dungeon, but they did manage to catch up and are providing quite the good competition here. Very different from what we unfortunately saw earlier today with their mother load, but that's all in the past now, as Abrakeydabra gets the coin-operated crowd pummeler to 60% and is rapidly dropping so much damage coming out of these 2 unholy DKs. Jay allowing them to just do as much damage as possible. I don't even know if he popped his Blade Flurry on that. I think he's just letting the unholy DKs get all their damage in and funnel it into that boss.
He for sure didn't even hit the button, and that's just a huge team player right there, letting the unholy DK completely take care of that AoE damage. Now he'll probably start hitting Blade Flurry when there's only 2 mobs left, because at that point the exponential value of just having 2 mobs isn't that big of a deal for the unholy DKs. In having a second target from Blade Flurry gives you a little bit of extra single target damage for the Outlaw Rogue. But yeah, I mean, you can just see Dr. J, you can start slowly moving up the damage meters here.
Well, what I could see is that they actually missed one of the foot bombs, and they got the debuff on the group there, which not only it's actually a double whammy, right? The boss doesn't get his 3rd stack of 50% damage increase, and then on top of it, the players are the ones taking the damage increase. So a bit of danger there. Fortunately, no deaths for them, but certainly a bunch of wasted damage on the coin-operated crowd pummeler right now. They still sit pretty at it at 15% right now, with 53% trash, and the 2 Peacekeepers haven't even died, so they'll probably get to about 60 by the end of it. Method, on the other hand, seems to be sticking to a more traditional route, I would say, of getting 80-ish% trash before that first boss. So I guess Method does not really believe in the drill tactic.
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to see that based off their trash percentage, for sure, they're not going to be doing anything with the drillers at the end here. But this is the pull we were talking about, which is what really the Unholy DK for. You know, the damage is nice from the Unholy DKs, but this pull is the entire reason for the Unholy DKs. I believe you mentioned yesterday.
In any dungeon.
It's like eating hot butter.
Listen, I wanted to say that they're cutting through them like warm butter, but then I said eating, so I just went with it. So I said that they're eating through them like warm butter. I mean, who hasn't eaten a stick of butter in their life? I'm just saying, Zyro, right?
Larkin has, for sure. But, I mean, I get it. It makes sense, though. It would be really easy to bite through warm butter. But look at the damage coming from the Unholy DKs. Both doing over 500,000 DPS, and all the trash is dead before they get any rock flexes off. I mean, that's the power of the Unholy DK. You don't have to deal with mechanics if all the trash is dead.
Like teeth through warm butter, but unfortunately, just not enough there. Divine Field does get a bit of that raging damage, and it's just enough to push him over the edge. She does immediately release, as they have secured their checkpoint at the first boss, Coin-operated crowd pummeler, who has now been pulled by Method and is at 80% as they move out of the first pile of coins to make sure the boss doesn't get any of that stacking 10% permanent buff for the rest of the fight. 69% trash here for Abrakeydabra versus Method EU's 83%, but of course they are they are well ahead. Method EU also has slipped in a death on their side, so both teams sitting at 1 death apiece.
Yeah, and it's actually really close right now. It's pretty. I would say it's pretty neck and neck, because we know what Abracadabra's going to do for the rest of their trash percentage, right? They're going to do this pack, and then they're going to go do 4 of those extractors at the same time, and then they're going to Shadow Meld off the drillers that come out of the extractors, and that'll get them to about 92, 93%, and then they'll be able to finish that off by pulling Taskmaster on top of Azerok. Method is going for a more traditional route, where they're going to pull this trash pack that we just saw Abrakeydabra deal with, and probably melt through it just like Abrakeydabra did with the double Unholy DK, just like warm butter, yeah, just like that. And it's just a difference in trash styles, and I'm actually interested to see, because both teams have executed pretty well in this dungeon so far. We haven't seen too many mistakes. 1 spot death for both teams, which is
it's almost to be expected with the kind of danger of the trash in here and raging.
I mean, just the raging FX. I mean, another spot death on the side of Abrakeydabra there. There's just so much random damage that goes on in the group. A raging one shot is just going to happen. I'm interested to see which of the strategies ends up being better here, though.
I mean, so far, I would say Method EU's a bit ahead. They've dealt with the first boss now. They're sitting at more trash percentage than Abrakeydabra, and they only have to do one pull and they're on to the second boss. So Abrakeydabra really needs to work through this pack very quickly right now, and they've already committed their bloodlust to it. I would say Method EU, in terms of raw dungeon progression, is ahead. Ashine goes down as well. I don't even know if he didn't commit his he committed a couple of his cooldowns, but not too many of them, as he immediately releases and starts running back for this quadruple extractor pull. Jay taking brunt of the damage. Divine Field getting absolutely drilled by these extractors right now as he desperately runs away. A lot of raging coming up. There's no way he is surviving that. Those need to die way faster. He didn't have access to shield wall. His bolstered last stand was down already. Iron Bark had already been used by Smog. He was completely naked there in terms of defensives. And I mean, frankly, at that point, I would have just heroic leapt away and just run for my life. But maybe that's what he was planning to do. He died so fast there. Full team wipe, 8 deaths on the board, and ball fully in Method EU's half of the court, Zyro.
And while all that was going on, like you said, Method EU, they just finished the trash pack. Warm Butter again, just cut through it easily, and they're on the boss. And once again, these Unholy DKs, oh, look at this. Mirez, he's loving life right now. No fixates, he's just going to go crazy. He's going to do full-on AoE here. Doesn't have to worry about anything. And, well, poor Frag and poor Genji are going to have to run in circles while Mirez gets to do the fun stuff.
Yeah, Frag certainly stuck between a rock and a hard place right now on this boss as Azarok drops to 85%. Mir is just getting as much damage in, just like Zyra said. He's free to just, go ham on this boss right now as it's kited around in slow circles. You can see the chains of fights going up on these various Earth Ragers to help the melee kite, but yet try to be efficient while doing so and stay in front of the boss in order to get as much damage output as they can. Earth Rager is finally starting to get buffed by the boss, where they grow when they glow big and bright and blue like that, they will take increased damage but also deal substantially increased damage. So you certainly want to get them down quickly. You can see the damage coming out on Gingy right now. So much struggle for Zaylia to heal him up, but finally the bleeds fall off and he's just trying to get him out of that 4 stack of Grievous above 90%.
Yep, final Earth Rager goes down, and of course they're in a free space right now where they're able to single target the boss down. Of course, their 2 more Earth Ragers will spawn. They'll probably deal with these 2 Earth Ragers, and then I imagine they would pull more trash on top of the boss, and they can AoE it down when those Unholy DK cooldowns come back up. That's normally what we see from both teams. Abrakeydabra still having problems on their side. They have 4 enraged raging extractors, and Divine Field doesn't want to be anywhere near.
Man, I haven't seen drilling like that since I went to the dentist last week. Zyra, Abrakeydabra still at 84%, and the extractors are just, man, they do so much damage, and they have a really dangerous frontal. There's cleave damage. Smok just procced his staff as I was talking there. That's pretty much out of the equation for the rest of the dungeon, right? I appreciate the efficiency in terms of raw percentage that the extractors give, similar to Peacekeepers, really. I'm not really sure if it's worth the trade-off. That's really dangerous. Obviously, Abra would disagree. It's something that they practice. You do get a huge bump in percent, but for the 2 times that they've done Motherload today, both of them have been pretty disastrous in the corner with the extractors.
Yeah, we saw the clean version of it yesterday when they first pulled off this dungeon, but man, it could have been a lot better. On the side of Method EU, Zaylia has also procced staff, so neither of the healers will have that available for the rest of the dungeon. And actually, Method EU opting just for the safer play. They're not going for the big trash pull on top of Azarok, which is what we assumed that they would do. I imagine they might... No, what he used, well, Abra is doing.
Yeah, exactly.
Abra is going for the pull. That's a dangerous pull with the Stone Ragers. But the thing is, it also enables the Unholy DKs even more. So we'll have to see if that's going to work out for them. And it looks like it is. Those Earth Ragers are dead way faster than they were for Method EU.
They are, but it's still a pretty rocky situation right now as the rest of the trash is starting to enrage and they're cutting around in circles. So Divine Field might plop over. Dr. J does not have access to his cheat death. Just with one swing right there, Divine Field dropped from 100 to 33%. Jay, so many bleeds on him, finally gets off, but he still has 3 stack, now 4 stack of Grievous. Rallying Cry goes up from Divine Field in a desperate attempt to keep Jay alive, which does work as Smok pours a ton of healing into Jay to get him back above that 90% threshold. Method EU sitting great right now as they pull their last 5% trash with the War Machine and the Technician on top of Rixa Flux Flame. That'll be the remaining 100% trash that they need, and after that it's just finish off Rixa and then get up to Mogul Razdunk.
Yeah, and of course with the Unholy DKs plus the Rogue, this is going to be not a big deal. This is similar to what, the first boss pull that Abrakeydabra was pulling off. They're just going to go ahead and cleave those down nice and easily with Rixa Flux Flame. Now, of course, their group comp, it deals with the debuff from Rixa very easily. They've got the AMS on both the DKs. They've got the Cloak for the Rogue, so they can remove those debuffs pretty much at will. So the amount of group damage that goes out on Rixa is not going to be that big of a deal. It's just kind of a big single target boss check for them. Now it is fortified, so it doesn't have as much HP as it does on Tyrannical, but still, you have to make sure you're placing these pools on the ground in proper places and then blasting them away as well.
Blasting them. Yeah, you know, it's weird. This is one of those bosses that you don't think is really that dangerous in terms of mechanic play outside of just the damage output that she has. But if you misplay those pools, that platform, especially with the pipes leaking, their ooze left and right, actually fills up quite quickly, and you get in a bit of trouble. So you do have to make sure to handle those mechanics well, as Rixa does now drop to 53%, something that Method EU is indeed doing well. Azarok finally dropping here for Abrakeydabra, who has 9 deaths on the board, so they have an extra 40 seconds worth of death over Method EU's 1. Azarok going down now. Abra sitting at 98%, and they have one last Earthshaper in there that'll give them their last 100%. They'll rush over to Rixa. Zyro, it's that time of the dungeon again, where we say there's no way Method EU can lose, and they have nothing that can stop them, but it's kind of looking that way so far.
Well, you know, normally we would think that, but we found out today that there's a pesky little ad in the intermission of Mogul Rasdunk. Maybe he just wants to jump outside the arena. Hopefully that doesn't happen again. So
I mean, hopefully teams don't take him near the stairs then.
We'll have to keep an eye. I mean, he jumped away from like halfway across the room. That was nasty. I mean, okay, it was either way. Hopefully it doesn't happen to either of these two teams. I mean, I don't even think we even knew that was possible, to be honest.
Perhaps. Rixa, you're at 7% right now. I mean, I don't know what you want me to say that. Maybe we did. Maybe we didn't, Zyro.
Yes, maybe.
It's not our it's not our responsibility to tell them, right?
No, it's not.
Divine Field, they're dropping so low with the last trash, but does not die. All the team Shadow Melts here for Abrakeydabra right now as they get ready to pull Rixa Flux Flame, something that Method EU has already killed and is running up the mine-infested field to Mogul Rasdunk right now. They finished all their trash, so they also are going to Shadow Meld in just a moment here. All of 5 of them are Night Elves, and then they're going to get started on Mogul Rasdunk.
Yep, and of course, once again, they've got their Bloodlust available. There's no questioning it this time around, as we're used to doing. They have the Bloodlust available, and
you think it'll come back up?
No, it definitely will not come back up here as they pop it, unless this boss lasts 10 minutes, which I don't think it would. They need like a tyrannical like 30 or something for that. So
I mean, they survived a tyrannical 30.
I don't think they could either. So we'll see. I mean, yeah, they used their Bloodlust in the first phase, which is, you know, when I would expect people to use it for damage. But we've had times where teams will get to this boss and they'll like save their Bloodlust for the second phase of the boss, as if they're scared they're going to wipe to the transition or something, or they'll even pop into the transition just for extra healing for safety. But this is a cocky play, honestly. They're good players. This is the best time to use it for damage. They're not worried about wiping in the intermission, so, you know, use it for damage.
And it's when it lines up guaranteed, you know, you pre-pod, all cooldowns are likely up, so it is absolutely, as you're saying, for maximum damage here. Mogul Rasdunk dipping below 50% right now, meaning he's about to start his shield transition phase. There we go. We're going to get the 2 Sky Scorchers come out on either side of the platform, and indeed, as we saw, either side of the platform, depending which way you're looking, but they do come out. You can see the team already pulling it slightly away from the stairs, not wanting any mishaps to happen with any boss resets, with the mobs jumping outside of the arena. Mogul Rasdunk starting his first drill smash, teams making sure to take them over to the correct oil drums that they've placed around the arena, as now, and I mean really anybody else, but preferably the tank, intercepts these Heart Seekers, which Azerite Heart Seekers, which cause you to take 35% reduced healing and hit you for a fair bit too, so might as well put it on the tank, who's not actually tanking much right now.
Yep, 2 more pillars left for Method EU to get through this transition phase, and I'm kind of looking at the timer here. We were talking about the impressive time that Abrakeydabra has in this dungeon. Their time that they had earlier in the cup was 18:56, which is, by all means, incredibly fast in Motherload. It looks like Method EU is set to beat that by almost over a minute here, which would be crazy impressive. This has just been an absolutely clean run, you know, minus the 1 spot death, but like we mentioned earlier, in this Raging Affix, that's just bound to happen at some point in the dungeon.
Yeah, that's just, you would be lucky basically to not have it happen rather than unlucky to have it happen. So Mogul Rasdunk, 25% here for Method EU, looking to commandingly take the first boss, as Ashine on the side of Abrakeydabra unfortunately does not make the full skip, and they will need to use the res here to start the encounter. They sit at 10 deaths on the dungeon, so a cleaner run, if I'm not mistaken, than their first Motherload today, but it is just not enough to deal with this Method EU powerhouse, Zyro.
Yep, I mean, there it is. Mogul Rasdunk at 5% now for Method EU, and we mentioned it before the series. I mean, Abrakeydabra would have to play absolutely perfectly to have any chance of taking down Method EU. They've looked unstoppable this cup, and we noticed, even with the time trial times, they set insane times, and they're really living up to those times right now.
They most certainly are. Method EU with a very powerful victory there in the Motherload, and showing why they are that #1 seed, and why thus far in cup play titles they've been undefeated.
I mean, it feels like we've really opened up the box with the double Unholy DK, really showing a lot of potential in some of these dungeons for how strong it actually can be. So it's actually really nice to see Method EU using that in the Motherload, doing a ton of DPS, some very insane pulls with some of these with some of these pretty large packs that we have been seeing from them. We actually see it on their opener. They actually end up getting 26% count from their opening pull of the dungeon, which is, for Motherload, is just an insane amount because of these mobs in this high density part of the beginning part of the dungeon with all of the thugs can be a very dangerous task, especially whenever they do begin raging. They begin doing hitting me with the clothesline. It can just be very scary. Abrakeydabra, I actually still love this pull into coin-operated crowd pummeler. Jay, of course, loves to pat on that pack, so...
He didn't do it this time.
He didn't? Really?
No, he didn't hit Blade Flurry at all.
That's hilarious. Okay, so Method EU, though, ends up pulling the Earthshapers. And then also, this War Machine pull, so for most pulls, we don't see anybody pull the War Machine or the Technician, but Method EU always loves pulling it into Rixa Flux Flame, believing that it's actually not that dangerous, not as dangerous as some other people believe, and Method EU ends up taking the match because of just minor optimizations like that.
They end up taking the match, and Tettles ends up taking a slight bit of pride. So while Tettles starts crafting a very snarky tweet to go to Jay because he didn't press Blade Flurry this time, we'll be taking a quick break before we go into Tol Dagor. So just one moment, and we'll be right back. Method EU is up 1 in our grand finals right now as we're going into Tol Dagor. Abrakeydabra is going to have to pull out some magic, and they might be busting out the Mage to do it, Zyro.
Oh, I'm really interested to see this Mage play again. I wonder if Dr. J could have seen that Ring of Frost from Dilemma and maybe picked up on that and decided to run it here. I'd be really interested to see.
Hard to see things when you're eating dirt on the floor because you're dead on the balcony in this dungeon, Zyra. So hopefully that doesn't happen again here for Dr. J as he has busted out that Frost Mage. What do you see there, Zyra?
He's not running Ring of Frost. He's still running Frigid Winds for that extra slow, so we'll have to see if they are able to pull off that pull on the balcony again here.
Well, let's hope that works out for them this time because that was a very complex pull they tried to pull off, and a lot could go wrong. It certainly went wrong twice for them. And right off the bat, Dr. J going down. If he had that Ring of Frost, this never would have happened. Bloodlust already 10 seconds in here for Abrakeydabra right now. They do use the Battle Res immediately. Divine Field going down as well. Ashine follows suit, and we're going to have a full team wipe nice and early here for Abrakeydabra. Method EU already 62% on the Sand Queen. Frag is, of course, as an Unholy DK, soloed all of the trash that's come in, and they're just about to have their Bloodlust wear off. Zyro, as you were saying...
Was I saying something?
You were talking about the prowess of Frost Mage.
Yeah, Frost is insane. But the problem is, when you're dead, you can do damage, so it doesn't really matter what comp you're playing if you're dead, unfortunately. I want to see this 13-minute Tol Dagor from Method EU, because they were so much faster in this dungeon, and King's Rest, mind you, but specifically since we're in Tol Dagor right now, they were so much faster here than every other team. I want to see if they can pull off the 13-minute Tol Dagor in cut play. That'd be really impressive to see.
That would be impressive, and I'm not sure why Abra is playing so sloppily. None of them have a flight to catch tonight, so they should have the time to invest into this dungeon and just get as much damage in as they can. But Method EU here, just drilling as much damage out on Sand Queen as they can.
Yeah, I mean... I'd be really unfortunate if that was the case for you with all the 3-game series we've had today. So, yeah, I mean, Method EU, they're absolutely crushing this boss. And I think it's important to mention, how strong the Unholy DK is. Last time we saw Tol Dagor, we were talking about it in between games. The power of the Unholy DK, you do so much damage when you pull all this trash on top of the first boss.
Was it not Ashine in the previous Tol Dagor series that did 2.4 million DPS to all of the... They basically pulled the entire room into Sand Queen. I unfortunately didn't catch what Frag peaked at just because we were paying attention to Abrakeydabra. I was paying attention to Abrakeedabra's wipe unraveling, pull unraveling into a wipe, unfortunately. But I mean, he must have peaked out at something crazy.
Maybe Tettles has a clip for us later on. We'd love to see how much he actually peaked at. Maybe if he topped, did more than Ashine did earlier. So that'd be good to see. Abrakeydabra, they got to gear up to pull Sand Queen again here. So a little unfortunate they had that early on wipe for them. But Method EU already progressing onto the second floor of the dungeon here.
Yeah, it's a very awkward situation now for Abra because they invested all of their cooldowns into that, and the most important ones for that size of pull, especially with Necrotic coming up. But full wipe here for Method EU. A Battle Res did go up on Mirrors. I'm not sure where the Battle Res is. Okay, it's in the hallway, so they kind of half recovered it, but what really happened there? I keep getting distracted with Abra and the situation, the troubles they're having, but Method EU with their own struggles on the side here, a complete misskip from them.
I mean, that is a pretty that's a pretty solid recovery as well, because they'd have to do their entire skip that they've already done to this point all over again. So getting that real quick clutch Battle Res out, I mean, that's pretty solid.
They've actually only salvaged half of their skip. I believe they're in between the floors of where the sewers are with the Crocs and the middle floor consisting of the jail with the buffs. So they're not actually on Jess Hallis's, almost on Jess Hallis's floor. If I saw correctly. We'll see in a moment here exactly, but I'm pretty sure they still have two floors. They're 2 floors down from Jess Howlis. So So they actually still have a bit of skipping to go, and it's probably part of the reason why they're waiting. Now is still dead. They're, I guess, searching for a way to res him. Maybe Zayla is out of range of the res for now, right now. We'll have to see. We do have a couple of them don't even have their Shadow Meld available. Abrakeydabra has now re-engaged with the Sand Queen, though.
And fortunately, it looks like Now is actually disconnected, so they're waiting for him to get back in and reconnect to take that res. So a little bit of unfortunate for Method EU, but of course, in these tournaments, your internet connection is your own problem. We can't do any remakes because of that, so they'll have to wait for him to get back into the game. But this is kind of giving Abrakeydabra a chance to get back into the game. They were able to cleave down all of those sand crabs with the boss, and they're kind of catching up a bit. But as I say that, Ashine goes down.
As you say that, Ashine goes down. They have killed most of the trash here, and the only trash remaining is really the boss's ads and the drones right now, but they are cleaved down easily between the combination of Dr. J and Swagstep. So the Sand Queen is getting chiseled down ever so slowly, unfortunately, because they lost most of the prowess in the pull. Now, what I wanted to mention earlier, Zyra, before the unfortunate circumstance on Method EU side is that, you know, Abrakeydabra is in a very awkward position. They put everything into that pull. Bloodlust went down, all those long-term cooldowns, I think, what is it, 8 minutes on Army for Unholy DK, so everything went into that pull, and then Dr. J flopped, and then Divine Field fell immediately after. Divine fell, haha. And then we just had a complete unraveling wipe. Those are cooldowns you can't wait for, so then they had to kind of baby steps, pull a bunch of the trash, and then slowly rebuild into the Sand Queen, probably waiting for 2/3 minutes cooldowns at most. So they're very behind right now. They're unfortunately fortunate that Method EU is having the issues they're having on their side. It allows them to catch up a bit, but even at this point in the dungeon, they're still fairly behind.
I mean, there's been a lot of unfortunately fortunate things that have happened to Abrakeydabra today, so this is just another one on top. I mean, it feels like the world is wanting for an Abrakeydabra win today, because they've just had all of the cards fall in their favor today. But they're going to be moving on to pretty much where Method EU is at this point. And to be honest, you know, Method EU, their strategy of this dungeon is still better, so should now get back any second here. They should be able to, you know, still move on and have an advantage in this dungeon, but we're going to keep an eye on Abrakeydabra as they move on up here and see how they end up doing these pulls. The thing that I'm looking for Abrakeydabra specifically is how they're, you know, putting together their pull whenever they get to the cannons. They had a lot of issues with that earlier today.
They just, I actually love their strat at the cannons, but it has a lot of moving parts, and as a result, a lot of points of failure, and we saw those points of failures come in twice over on their Tol Dagor pull, Tol Dagor run, earlier today. So hopefully they can get it together. First, they still have to, of course, get past Jess House's floor and room. As we can see, Divine Field already positioning himself on the side there, popping his Shadow Meld as a Night Elf and getting ready as he grabs the Arsonist to do a bit of trash. Usually they take this first pack's worth of trash. Afterwards, Zmock will be the one pulling Jess Hallis through the wall. Zmock getting actually quite low. Something's hitting him in the back. Divine Field accidentally did not get aggro on something. It actually ends up going down. Zmock's going to follow suit as well, and the rest of the group runs off to the side. This is an absolute disaster. I don't think they're going to be able to salvage this. No, I mean, they used their Night Elf racial to try and get out of it. It still seems that they're stuck in combat. Dr. J is the only one who manages to sneak out of this because of his Invis. Actually, I'm not sure if he used Invis or Shadow Meld, whichever one it was. Nonetheless, they are both consumed now, and the rest of the team is downstairs. They're going to have to wait for their Shadow Meld to come back up, Zyro. I mean, it's going to take them a while to get back up. They got to wait for the CDs. They got to skip the entire floor full of dangerous mobs, and it's just going to be an absolute mess here as they sit at 11 deaths on the board.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little unfortunate. We do see Now coming back in for Method EU. He was able to get back online, of course. Like I mentioned earlier, your internet connection is your own responsibility in this tournament. Obviously, Blizzard can't, you know, go to each player's house and figure out your connection for you. So
I mean, they could.
They could,
but they won't.
That'd be crazy expensive, man. That'd be ridiculous. So yeah, Now is back in. Method EU is going to move on in the dungeon. And honestly, for Method EU, this has got to be like, wow, we got away here, because Abrakeydabra, they've had two pretty catastrophic wipes in this dungeon so far. And Method EU, I mean, they're ahead still somehow.
I'm going to assume that what happened was actually a sportsman-like purposeful wipe on the side of Abrakeydabra, out of respect for the fact that Method EU's tank was disconnected, to allow them to return to the same relative position in the lead in the dungeon as they were earlier. It can't be any other way, Zyro.
It's important to mention as well, Abrakeydabra, they were jumping around at the first boss spot. They kind of had to wait. Their Shadow Melds were on cooldown.
No.
So they literally...
I was just trolling. Spoiler, by the way.
Wait, you would do that on broadcast?
Me?
Unbelievable. Yeah, I mean, that's really for Twitch that, because, why are they jumping around the boss? Did they give up or something? No, they were waiting for their Shadow Med cooldown. They couldn't get through this section of the dungeon until that came back up. So that's why we saw them jumping around for a little bit there.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the rest of this dungeon is you have a kind of a small choke point, if you will, on the Just Hallis floor. We do see teams having issues there, usually with an affix that either consists of Necrotic, which we have, Volcanic, not as dangerous, Explosive, or Sanguine. Those are the three, the triad, if you will, of affixes that do cause wipes on Just Hallis that otherwise is really not that dangerous of a boss. And I would say between those three, the lowest danger is probably Explosives or Necrotic. So with the caliber of these teams, you should be able to handle it. Now, the major choke point after that, Zyra, as you mentioned earlier, is really just the cannon play. If Abrakeedabra's monster, crazy, moving part pull comes together for the cannon, I don't see how it can get much better. But, you know, we keep boasting the Tol de Gore time that Method EU put out in their time trials.
I mean, we're still going to be able to see the strategy they did. Obviously, we won't see the 13-minute dungeon because they had to sit there and wait for him to come back for 4 or 5 minutes. But we'll still be able to see how they put it together and how their dungeon run goes together. So I'm still really interested to see. I'm keeping an eye on Method EU here. Obviously, we know how Abrakeydabra does it. The question on their end is if they're able to pull it together in cut play.
I mean, if they are, they need to do it by, and they need to do it. They need to do it well, and they need to win the dungeon by at least 35 seconds at this point. That's the death difference between them. 7 deaths for the 11 versus 4 deaths of Abra versus EU. Now, Abra is at 34% trash, and they're at the same spot of Just Hallis, just entering the second phase, both Method EU and Abra. Method EU sitting at 25% trash, so they're a bit behind on trash, but if you do a proper cannon strat, then, you know, to a certain extent, who really cares about 9%? It doesn't matter if there's 20 mobs or 25 mobs in a huge pack coming towards the cannon. As long as you do it properly, both mob size of that caliber is going to wipe your group, so you got to do it well. So who cares about the 9% difference between the two teams right now? It just comes down to the cannon play right after this boss.
Right, and there's no AoE cap on the cannon. It does the same damage to everything regardless of how many mobs there are. So that's kind of why the 5-shot difference is such a big deal. You cannot miss any of those shots, and I'm interested to see how Method EU pulled off their strat, because the Frost Mage makes a lot of sense. We talked about it earlier today when we saw it for the first time. Having the extra slow lets you group everything up so cleanly, and even when they're slowed, you can just take much easier cannon shots. You can knock everything back with the cannon in the same direction. It just provides such a huge benefit to the group, so I'm interested to see how Method EU pulls this off cleanly without the Frost Mage.
Notably here, because we've discussed this before for Resto Druids, it was felt that generally Mass Entangle was actually a superior choice. However, Zayla is actually running with Typhoon, and him of all players I would expect to make a very conscious choice about why that is. So I would assume it's something to do with the combination first of getting everything grouped up with an Ursula's Vortex. Once everything is pinpoint grouped up, then yeah, you're good to go with the Typhoon after that. But if the mobs are spread, you'll benefit more from a Mass Entangle. So once again, as we've said many times, we will see, and we will see momentarily as both teams have killed off Just Hallis, and Abrakeydabra and Method EU heading up the stairs at the exact same time. Tanks making sure to grab aggro and threat as they go upstairs so that nothing has any residual leaks of melee on the group as they run up.
I mean, earlier today, I'm really interested to see how they do this. Of course, they're going to clear off some trash on the bridge first, a little bit on the side of Method EU, I believe. I don't think Abrakeydabra does. Like you mentioned, Divinefield gathers up everything on the ledge by himself first, and then we usually see, like we saw earlier today, we saw, I believe, Dr. J and Swagstep move inside the upper section of the dungeon and try to pull things for the tank. Now, of course, that was where the problem was the first time through. Dr. J and Swag ended up going down to that trash, and they really couldn't get everything together at that point. But keep an eye on Method EU. I believe it was No Girls Allowed. They had instead Trell go inside and pull everything instead, because he's a lot tankier, and it might be a little bit less efficient, but it's definitely a lot safer.
Typically with most cannon strats, we actually do usually see the tank grab a Swift Speed pod or a Skystep potion and then head into the room and grab the trash out. But with this kind of bifocal or dual point pull strategy, it's a bit more dangerous for the tank to be on the outside. Now, in fact, is the one that runs in. He hasn't even popped Skystep, as far as I know. He's just kind of auto-running through the area, grabbing aggro and everything. Heroic leaps back towards the entrance. He's going to charge back in and then get in there. Swagstep goes down again. Was he in the same spot? Was he on the inside? I'm not sure exactly where he was, but one more time, third time now that the exact same issue happened on this pull. Swagstep went down, trying to grab everything, and I assume tricks it to the tank standing on the outside, Divinefield, who is now line of sighting around the corner to try and funnel in these mobs as much as possible with Dr. J's support slow from the Blizzard.
Now, of course, we did see actually this, like we saw both strats actually come out from Method today. Now pulled one side, Genji pulled the other side and tricks it to him. We see Genji going down in the cannon here, unfortunately. It's like he pulled aggro on something and got shot, so they won't have someone in the cannon. That's really unfortunate because the cannon's kind of supposed to cleave the rest of this down, unless they used all 5 of their shots. I don't think they did, though.
I don't think they did, and there's a lot of mobs with large varying health here right now. They do have the kind of benefit of the second cannon there, which you can see Frag kind of going towards. I think they're trying to wait for Gingy to get back, but Gingy released. I don't think he got battle rest, so Frag dedicates himself to going the cannon once the Ring of Peace is down for Mirrors, which helps group up the adds, but there's a lot of different adds that are at high health stint and are not going to be killed by this cannon, so he's got to be really careful. He's already taking so much damage, immediately pops AMS and starts to line of sight around the corner as to not get shot by those Marines and certainly not allow any of that suppression fire to hit him. That is a very nasty. In fact, he has one of the debuffs on him right now as his anti-magic shell did run out. Now has 2 of those debuffs and he's starting to accrue a lot of necrotic stacks. A lot of damage going out on Frag as well. He has some residual threat. He gets healed up finally as now just barely hangs on, sub 20%. Xaylia finally able to focus on now as Frag is healthy and does get all threat removed from him.
I don't think that's what this strat was that they ended up going through the 13-minute total gore. I think that was kind of like them saying, oh, we messed up with the first cannon. Let's just use a second cannon to help us out here a little bit. And ended up working out for them, fortunately. But it's not going to get them as fast a time as they got in time trials. That being said, they don't really have to beat the time trials time. They just have to beat Abrakeydabra. And they knew that, and they said, okay, that's why we'll go with the backup plan here instead. So they'll end up doing a lot of their own DPS damage to this trash. Ooh, you want to shoot the enemy mobs, not now, Gingy. What are you doing?
Well, he forgot to pop his spell reflect in order to kill whoever is shooting him with the cannon. Xaylia goes down as well. He immediately releases and starts running back. Actually, did it release? Or yeah, he did release. I don't see him. I don't see his player frame within range there. So they did not dedicate their battle rest. That the battle rest. I'm sorry, it was actually dedicated to now. Frag got now up as soon as he died, and then Xaylia died immediately after. So they're sitting here without a healer, but they're well enough coordinated for crowd control to make sure that now stays alive by the time Xaylia gets in cat form and dashes all the way up through the jail and comes back to support heal now. He is back now. Everything is, relatively okay. They did not scuff and wipe the entire pool, but it's certainly not the cleanest we've seen from Method EU today.
Yeah, definitely not. And it looks like they're just going to end up pulling the rest of the trash that they haven't finished off with the cannon into the boss and cleave it down with their cooldowns. This is just good for the Unholy DK in the road. They'll be able to do a lot of extra cleave damage and single target boss damage. But these trash, I mean, it's all at like 40-50% still, so they have a lot of cleave to do. That being said, we always talk about Knight Captain Valyria not being a very mechanically intensive fight. As long as you're keeping an eye on where you have the barrels placed in the room, it should be totally fine. And I'm not trying to cast a curse them, but let's be honest, there's not a whole lot going on in this fight.
No, there's not. The real danger comes from these officers that cast Riot Shield and Handcuff. Handcuff needs to be interrupted. Riot Shield can only be interrupted with displacement or crowd control. You can't kick it, or kicked interrupted, that is, so you can't lock it out of spell school, but they do manage to kill all of the rest of the trash off as it was quite low health, putting them at 90% trash now, which means they can skip the Void Emissary after Knight Captain Valyria and only deal with the combination of 3 Wardens and 2 casters. So it should be no problem for them as Abrakeydabra still dealing with the cannon trash right now. They actually did end up killing the entirety of, if I'm not mistaken, the entirety of the pool that they kind of scuffed with Swag going down earlier, but obviously very slowly. Swag stayed dead the whole time. They 4-manned it. They slowly cut it around. Divine Field, as I'm speaking, got chunked really hard right now as he starts to backpedal with the help of the Blizzard from Dr. J. Method EU already at 38% on Knight Captain Valyria, sitting at 90% trash versus Abrakeydabra, who has not even engaged Knight Captain Valyria. I believe hasn't even done the trash in front of Knight Captain Valyria, and they have 84% trash right now.
Yeah, it looks like they'll just be able to skip straight through to Valyria here with a Shroud or a Shadow Meld afterwards. So I don't think they have True Sight as well. The captains do. So they'll have to Shadow Meld this trash off. But yeah, I mean, looking at the trash percentages, Abrakeydabra has enough right now to finish off the entire dungeon with the stuff that's right in front of Overseer Korgus. Method EU, I don't believe they have to kill the Void Touched Emissary when they're at 90%. I believe it's 88% that you need with the Void Touched Emissary, so they can just not deal with that at all. So they have that going for them as well. And I mean, Abrakeydabra, after all of the things that have gone wrong in this dungeon for them, they are catching up, but now just randomly dying on Knight Captain. That's a little unfortunate for them, but the boss is at 5%. They'll be able to finish it off. It could have been really bad if it was like 20-25%, but, you know, boss being that low, they'll be able to finish it off.
Now, he's not getting up either, so I have a feeling he might be having more disconnect issues right now. He's just staying dead on the floor. That's probably why he died. I mean, it's impossible to die on that, purposefully, at least on that boss as a tank, unless you're standing and inting in the explosions or anything. So hopefully that works out for them. They've decided to actually move on ahead and just start doing their tactic as Abrakeydabra tries to claw back into action right now. 53% on on Knight Captain Valeri as they start to do whatever they can with the boss. Unfortunately, did not pre-move it into the corner. Melee loses access to hitting the boss for a bit as she remains casting in her away from the barrels. You always want to make sure to pre-move that boss into the safe corner that you know you're going to go to. Otherwise, we have what happened there. The melee can't really access the boss, and they just have to sit there watching her for a bit. 33% now on Knight Captain Valeri, 89% trash as Method EU trying to four-man the rest of the trash waiting for their tank.
Yep, really unfortunate. I mean, this is impressive if they're able to pull it off without the tank for this trash. Technically, with the cannon knockbacks, and as long as they're interrupting the heals from the priest, you should be able to pull this off. But it's a little dangerous in general to do this without a tank.
I was going to say, you said very impressive so far, but really all they did was the same triple crowd control on the side that we saw other teams do, and then they just nuked down the Void Emissary, all the DPS are here, so they're able to do that, but they're not going to be able to do what you're saying once they actually aggroed everything. Mirrors went down immediately. Freg tried to stay alive with his Death Pact, went down immediately after. They're trying to group everything nicely together with Ursula's Vortex from Xaylia, and the cannon is finally manned by Gingy, so they might be able to pull some of it off. Xaylia immediately runs away as he got one of the casts on him. He doesn't have access to undulating tides. He's running desperately up the stairs, fully hodding himself and moving out of the volcanic under him, while Gingy, I believe, has already consumed all 5 shots of the cannon. Abrakeydabra in the same spot in the dungeon now with 14 deaths on the board versus Method EU's 11. Of course, 3 of those deaths from Method EU have been from this area now as they try to four-man this without their tank.
Yeah, I mean, this is a little bit unfortunate for them that this is happening to them. The fact that they've even gotten this far without full wiping to this trash pack is impressive in general. What I was saying was impressive was not the CC. I was just saying it would be impressive if they were able to pull the pull off, which it looks like is going to be very dangerous for them. Now is back. He has released.
Okay.
So he's here. He can come pull this off. He can come save the day for the team, but they have used their cannon shots already, so they're going to have to manually DPS the rest of this trash down. That being said, there are 3 extra deaths on the board for Abrakeydabra. Both teams have Bloodlust available, and this is going to end up being very close at the end, even with the disconnect issue.
Yeah, but the dangerous thing is now just got back. He has 1 taunt on an 8-second cooldown. You can heroic leap, as we know warriors can, in order to reset that once. There's 4 mobs running around. They're all at 20 to 30% health. Finally, they got control over everything. There goes a leg sweep, now getting pummeled by those wardens that do immense amounts of damage in this fortified. But it looks like they have enough control right now to finish this off and get started on Korga, something that Abrakeydabra has already done. There goes their Bloodlust, and they're getting hungry for it. They're trying to finish off this boss right now, use this to their advantage in order to take this to a game 3. The final warden falls here for Method EU, and they waste absolutely no time getting over to Korgus, taunting him, grabbing him, and here goes the Bloodlust for them as well.
Method EU pulled Overseer Korgus almost exactly 15 seconds after Abrakeydabra, which is the timer difference they have on their death here. This could end up being neck and neck, probably a couple seconds apart. That being said, we always talk about the single target prowess for Method EU. All their players are top-end world first raiders. They should technically be just that much better players. So that being said, all the cooldowns available, single target damage of Bloodlust. I would love to see how close it's going to be at the end.
It is on like Donkey Kong here as Overseer Korgus dips below 50% health for Abrakeydabra. 3-death difference still a thing between both teams. Not a single casualty on this boss so far. Not even doubles will stop them in this fortified environment. Healers will take good care of them. We have had undulating tides proc on the side of Xaylia. Not going to have access to that extra, about quite a significant amount of single target damage that provides. So bit of a damage loss there as Ashine dips to 30% as well. 35% on Korgus for Abrakeydabra and 44% on Method EU. As you mentioned, Zyro, their single target damage is just phenomenal right now.
They've just caught it completely. And here's the thing where the Frost Mage is going to, I think the Frost Mage is not a good pick on single target here. The Frost Mage does so much less damage than everyone on Method EU. You can see across the board, top 2 DPS for Method EU, doing 50k single target DPS. People are barely doing 45k for Abrakeydabra.
Yeah, I mean, they're certainly catching up. They're starting to widen the gap just a bit as likely another round of cooldowns has come up on Overseer Korgus here. Abrakeydabra 13% now versus Method EU's 21%. There's about a 10% gap. As soon as Korgus falls, there's going to be a 15-second timer started for Method EU. If they don't kill the boss on this, we are going to a map 3. Korgus falls, and let's keep an eye on that timer right now as Method EU tries to finish off this boss and sweep the series 2-0. 10 seconds left. Korgus sitting at 8, but Mirrors getting chunked and dying on the side adds an extra 5 seconds to the clock, and that's not going to be enough time. They could have had a chance at the very end to do it, but that death sealed the deal, and we are going to a game 3.
My heart can't take this. Abrakeydabra somehow, someway, taking that victory in Tol Dagor, and that puts us, as you mentioned, into the game 3, which is going to be on the freehold. And Tettles, I can't believe it. This match in particular, after all the DCs from now, after all the disconnects, after you saw Abrakeydabra waiting for a very long period after Sand Queen, I guess for Shadow Meld, something along those lines. they somehow pull through.
I mean, it was a dungeon, as Sloot normally says. I don't know. It was rough on both ends. Now having connection issues is just a terrible, terrible, unfortunate circumstance for Method EU. Abrakeydabra is really gifted this dungeon. Method EU actually did a really good job in Jess's room. They used Flying Serpent Kick to be able to pull Jess through the wall there. After now does have that prolonged DC. And then they kind of show off why they're able to get that 13-minute Toll-to-Gore run with how well they end up dealing with this very large pull with the cannon. All the mobs were just grouped up so tight. Abrakeydabra has some moments of brilliance too, showing off why the Frost Mage is so good with the Howling Winds slow. It just keeps the mobs grouped up for prolonged periods of time. And that's the name of the game with this cannon, just basically making sure the mobs are grouped up as closely as possible. Ring of Frost might be a little bit better for that, but Abrakeydabra did show why that Frost Mage was a good pick, and then they ended up taking the dungeon off of some interesting circumstances.
Off of a lot of weird circumstances onto that one, sure. But that's going to put us into Freehold, and we know, Sloot, that Method EU is no slouch in Freehold with some really strong times.
No, I mean, they're not a slouch in this dungeon either, but just because we've now finished the map, that doesn't supply any certainty that now's internet issues are done. So hopefully for their sake it is. It could provide some issue. I mean, we know that's on the players as per the rules, and I don't know what's up with Abra today, frankly. They had like 2 nice kind of cleaner games, and that was it, and then they're just back to their old ways now. It's a bit of a mess right now.
I mean, yeah, it's the now thing is super unfortunate. They do have a few minutes in between matches to try to figure out any problems there, reset the router, see what's going on there, but hopefully that won't be an issue in the Freehold. But like you mentioned, Method U's Freehold is disgusting. They're very fast in this dungeon, and it's going to take a lot from Abrakeydabra to come back and have a chance of winning this series in 3 games, rather.
Yeah, we'll have to see how they're going to be able to try to pull it off, as we're going to be taking a quick break before our final game of the day. After an amazing, adventurous day, it's time for our final game in our grand finals right now between Abrakeydabra and Method EU. 2 teams who have already qualified for BlizzCon, so if you'd like to support them and the rest of WoW Esports, be sure to check out the Transmorpher Beacon or Hoarder Alliance fireworks, as those will bolster the prize pool at the end of the year. I'm Jack, and joining me for our final game, we've got Sloot, Cyronic, and Teddles. And my friends, we are all friends once again. We're reunited, Sloot. It's happened.
Forcibly we are.
I'll take it. Freehold right now, Sloot. It's going to be really tough to beat Method EU, but as you mentioned before, there are some internet issues on the side of now.
And there were some internet issues. Hopefully they're done now,
yes,
for the sake of their team. But, I mean, Method EU, the only thing that's really stopped them so far is just internet issues. Outside of those, they picked it up right away. They went straight into dungeon. They actually almost won it after the tail end of 2DC. So Method EU is just having one of those days where they're borderline unstoppable, Jack.
Borderline unstoppable, internet permitting. Let's see how they're able to hold it all together as our final game is getting started right now in Freehold.
And Zyro here doing a little dance in his chair, not because it's the final match, but because there's no more Frost Mages in this dungeon. Both teams mass stealthing straight through here. Now, Zyro, we do know Method EU because we compared it to No Girls Allowed based on yesterday. We do know they do a pretty substantial pull early on. I think something like 27%. But the one time they did this, they actually lost now early on.
I believe they lost both Now and Fraggy on their first pull earlier on, so they were unable to res Fraggy. And yeah, like I mentioned as well earlier, by the way. They actually pulled 3 extra mobs they didn't mean to pull that first time around, so they're actually going for about 23.5% from this first pull is what it's going to come out to be if they get everything perfectly down. But this is a lot of spreading out so far. Maybe a little bit of early kiting. The Sanguine is on the ground, so we'll have to keep an eye on that. There's a little bit of healing going out, but the Sanguine management is the name of the game here.
You got to be careful with that Panini Christini on the ground now. Just cannot get past this 30% threshold. Zayla doing everything he can to keep him alive. Now he's getting tossed left and right now. He gets his Edict proc there, and he's just pumping as much Ignore Pain on top of Shield Block as he can, just staying well away from these mobs. But Gingy probably eats one of the brute hands, I believe, from one of the enforcers, one of the brutal backhands, that is, and just ends up going down right away. Doesn't have Cheat Death now for 6 minutes either. Battle Res goes up on him, so they have to take extra special care of Now, who's playing absolutely zero risk. Abrakeydabra, on the other hand, 19%. Trash is done for them. They've already started on Sky Captain Crag.
Yeah, this pull for Method EU doesn't look anywhere near as good as the first time they did it last time. Last time, they almost cleaved everything down right behind the pillar, and they just had to do a tiny little bit of kiting, whereas this time Now's had to kite almost in a giant circle around the entire room, and it just hasn't looked as good for them this time around. Abrakeydabra, they look a lot better than they did earlier today, and that's something interesting because out of all the dungeons today, I think the Freehold was probably the most clean dungeon they had. They had good Sanguine management. Divine was kiting like a boss. He was doing a great job with that. And yeah, he looking better than they did earlier today. That's a vast improvement.
All right, Senor Curse, let's back this on up like a U-Haul truck. We just started the dungeon here. We're on the first boss. They're only 19% trash of the way through. It's totally possible anything can go wrong. They might have a full wipe later on. We don't know. I mean, Abrakeydabra just had these weird spot hiccups all day. So you're right. Hopefully for their sake, they've been very hot and cold today. They've had a few hot dungeons, and this would be great for them to have a hot dungeon on the last dungeon of the day, and for once win one of the cups over Mythic, who had a rather scraggly start, already one death on the board, and no battle res available for 7.5 minutes now. They're about to have their bloodlust fall off right now. 23% trash on the board, with Skycat and Craig's 59% versus Abra's 46%.
Thanks for talking for a long time. It gave me time to look up Lonely Island memes on my phone so I can have those prepped for the rest of the dungeon here. Yeah, I mean, they're pretty neck and neck right now. Mythic does have a little bit better single target damage, like we saw at the end of that Toldagor dungeon there. It was a little unfortunate, man. I got so deflated when Mirez died because that was going to come down to the last second. They were so close together, but you know, what can you do? We get another dungeon out of it at least, so we get to see these teams go head to head another time, and Mythic gets a little bit of a chance for redemption now too. And yeah, I mean, it's looked a little shaky for Mythic EU so far in this dungeon, but there's a lot of time left for them to come back and show what they can do here.
Yeah, I mean, they merely lost that last dungeon, and Swagfist, just as I said, that goes down on the side of Abrakeydabra, and this is a tyrannical environment here. High health bosses. Swagfist goes down. He did get battle res, though. I do see that angel icon on his screen right now. Finally takes the res, so no battle res for them either for the next 6 minutes, along with Mythic EU, and they get right back into it. This downtime on one of their 3 DPS missing allowed Mythic EU to kind of claw back into action. Now they're only about 4 to 5% behind on the boss, and both teams, of course, still have the equal trash of 23%.
Here's how that conversation went in Discord. He dies, they do the battle res, he's like, are you sure boss is pretty low? And they're like, yeah, we're close, we need to take it, we need it. And then they take it, and then they go. It's something like that. That's what the comms are probably like. So yeah, I mean, that's definitely like a time play, right? They really want to make sure they get all the time they can. Swag it. Almost getting one shot again. You can see how difficult this boss is on 18 Tyrannical. I think 19 might just one shot.
19 would definitely one shot, because they get down to about 10 to 12% with chunks. You've seen it on the Unholy DKs, you've seen it on the Windwalkers. I actually imagine the conversation more like AFK bio, and then they just left him dead, and then he came back and took his res after that. So worked out for them. They did finish the boss off first as Mythic EU rears up and heads on across the bridge past the Enforcer as well. Enforcer that nobody ever really deals with. Abrakeydabra finally gets the nice open area where they do a fairly big pull here, but I think it's usually, I don't think they're actually going to play this, right? They just want to Shadow Meld it off, which is why we see the intimidating shout come out of Divine Field. Paralysis coming up on the Rat Trapper as Divine Field runs in and starts grabbing some of the mobs in order to get this pull down.
Yeah, this is similar to what we saw from both No Girls Allowed and Abrakeydabra earlier today, where they just shadow milled everything off that they pulled. Unfortunately, during this skip, we see Mirrors going down, so they have to commit a res to them. But this is the exact same thing we saw from Abrakeydabra and No Girls Allowed. They had multiple deaths.
What's going on?
During
Frag
this
goes
skip.
down too?
Looks like now it's going to go down too. They're just going to get a full res off. Yeah, this skip is kind of annoying. I mean, we saw, for instance, Trell purposefully died to this because he knew that this was going to be a tough skip for them to pull off. But
they all went down, actually. They had a full team wipe. So now Zayli needs to run all the way back by himself, does his usual kind of disengage onto the bridge in stealth form. Nice combo is from him as he gets back into stag form, heads across the bridge. The rest of the team lies in wait, except for Gingy, who of course is rogue and can stealth through as well. Abrakeydabra already well on their way to killing one of the bigger pulls here and trying to lay down the Sanguine masterfully. As we know, Divine Field is good at that back pedal kiting, making sure the Sanguine doesn't overlap any of the mobs for healing. 38% on the board here for them as they run in and grab some more trash. I forget exactly what percent they were at when they engaged the boss in the previous time they did Freehold. I think it was like mid-40s, something like that.
Yeah, it was a little over 40%. Of course, he's going to have to pull this right through some Sanguine on top of the boss.
Actually going... did they do this in the last time? This is a huge pull on top of the boss.
Don't think they did last time.
This is really aggressive.
This is really aggressive. Maybe it's something like, we're playing against Mythic EU. We have to do aggressive pulls like this because this is what we think they're going to do.
I mean, maybe, but Mythic EU is an entire trash pack technique or trash pulls worth behind Abrakeydabra right now. This is really scary. The bosses are basically on the edge of where they usually despawn. There's Sanguine everywhere. They can't go to the other side of the playfield because we see that Void mob just hiding behind the damage meter there, just got turned away by the Observer. One of the Strappers got bumped constantly into the Sanguine on the side there. They have to be extremely careful where they go with this. Not to mention that the Blade, as you can see whirling through the arena, is denying them any area to move into. There's a Typhoon, Ring of Pieces down. They have to be very careful with the Sanguine now because they don't have any more get-out-of-jail-free card as Divine Field leaps to the other side of the platform.
Not to mention all of those Void Zones, but for some reason this Council of Captains, even though they're sitting at the table, they don't know what to do when you jump on top of the
health.
table. Oh my, yeah, I mean, there you go. Sanguine, full health on Raul right there, which, you know, that's a pretty bad occurrence. But they are somehow still ahead in the dungeon. They just lost a lot of their advantage.
Yeah, they lost a huge advantage here. They still have a 4-death advantage, though, over Method EU, so that's an extra 20-second leeway in the dungeon. But Raul, this is, I mean, this is an incredible pull, and they've pulled it off in terms of survivability, and that's very, you know, clap for that, easy clap kind of thing going on. But the worrisome thing here is that it is risky. They know it's risky. Any player at this caliber will know it's risky because Raul is such an immobile boss. He constantly sits and casts Barrel Smash. He casts, I forget currently the name of the Blackout Barrel. He casts Blackout Barrel as well on one of the players, and he always just parks and casts it. So to do a heroic leap, once you've already cornered yourself over some pre-laid pools of Sanguine and risk Raul running through those pools, you take a huge chance, and the coin flip didn't work this time.
I mean, I feel like you kind of just have to take that chance, or maybe in his mind is like, okay, he's already 100 HP because there's no way I'm getting across this without him healing to full. Little unfortunate, but they did kind of work themselves into a corner. Like you mentioned it, they were running towards that Void Emissary. They only had one direction left to go. So yeah, the trash pull, it was a little aggressive from them, or it was very aggressive from them, and it just didn't end up working out for them, unfortunately. That being said, they've gotten very good brew, like bad brew RNG. They've put a lot of them on both mobs. Like Divine's been very good about placing both of the bosses in the bad brew. And even though, you know, Method EU ended up pulling the boss at about the same time Raul healed to full, they were able to pretty much keep their advantage on the boss.
Advantage on the boss indeed as Captain Rule falls here for Abrakeydabra. They sit at 46% trash, which is still 5% above Method EU. Method EU still has 19% on Captain Jolly left as Abrakeydabra already mounted up and started riding towards Trothak. Now, unfortunate timing for them as the patrol that goes back and forth in front of the Ring of Booty where Trothak and Ludwig von Schnitzel lie has actually patrolled right in front of where they are now. Divine Field, though, rearing up for what seems to be a pretty sizable pull as he pulls some of the pack upstairs. Oh, they actually pull the patrol with it right now along with the Emissary of Tides, grab threat on everything, and immediately heroic leap into the arena as to tank it down in here. This is like a 15 mob pull. This is pretty meaty.
Yeah, this is a lot.
And Ludwig's there.
This is with Ludwig, so we're going to have to see, once again, are they able to deal with the Sanguine from these mobs? They don't have that much of a hindrance on where they are in the arena here. They can use the entire arena. They don't have to worry about an emissary that they would aggro here. But obviously, they can't run out of the room, and they just still do have to dodge those turtle shells. That being said, you can see with the size of the pull what the Unholy DK allows the groups to do. Ashstein is just pop, 400k burst. No problem. No biggie. Just easily deal with all the mobs to get them low, and then they can use those Ring of Pieces and those Typhoons from the healer to make sure that Ludwig von, what'd you say, Schnitzel doesn't get healed up by any of the Sanguine?
Yeah, I mean, Nagura taught me these German words, and yeah, exactly. So Abrakeydabra now 58% trash, 59% trash. They still have a Ludwig left as well, trying to get that down as quickly as possible in order to spawn Trothak. Method EU responding with an equally sizable pull. I don't see Ludwig in there just yet. He must still be spawning in the back. There he is right now. So they grab him the moment he spawns. Frag and the rest of his team already in position to snatch that as they try to DPS out the mobs as evenly as possible. Now, DPSing everything down as evenly as possible just makes it so much easier for Sanguine because Sanguine has a small arming time when it actually goes down on the floor. I believe it's a second until the pool actually grows in full size before it starts healing mobs. So just killing everything with ridiculous burst damage from that Unholy DK, which is what you're shaking your head back and forth about, Zyro. It just doesn't matter, right? They all just melt at the same point, so they have a nice little pool of multiple stacks of Sanguine that didn't actually arm, and just really well done here by Method EU.
I'm looking at the damage meter, looking at the particular damage values, and I'm like, okay, so he's saving his cooldowns for when Ludwig comes out. He's at 1.8 million damage, hits one button, 5.8, hits another button, 9.4, another button, 13. You ever just have a button that does 4 million damage? I wish I had one of those on my class.
Well, then maybe you should roll an Unholy DK.
Maybe I should.
Abrakeydabra combining more trash on top of Trothak right now, who's at 93%. They are 4% ahead of Method EU for trash, which of course are the remaining Emissary of Tides and Ludwig von Tortolin on Method EU side. So they'll match that 65 shortly as Trothak is rapidly dropping here for Abrakeydabra. Now they have to be, once again, really careful. We've seen I mean, we've already seen it this dungeon. Smok going down. Let's put that on hold right now. Undulating Times proc. Smok goes down. They do have the res, fortunately, from the Unholy DK, as Aishan immediately pops AMS, runs out. He sees one of the... That was good play from me. He sees one of the sharks running, jumping out at him, so he pops Anti-Magic Shell because the shark damage is nature damage. So he's able to absorb a lot of that damage as he runs around and gets the res with the 30 RP required, runic power required to get Smok up. Everything's nice and stable. Now they just have to make sure to not, again, because they've done it once in this dungeon already, run this boss through Sanguine.
Yeah, Mythic EU is actually doing the safer strat that we saw No Girls Allowed pulling off earlier today, where they're opting to go for a double trash pull while they wait for the boss to spawn. Of course, because they do this, they're not going to be able to engage the boss the second it spawns unless they deal with this trash pack incredibly quickly, which they just might actually pull off. I guess I spoke too soon. That was perfect, and the boss just now spawned. They lost like what, 3 seconds on the boss because of that? That was ridiculous.
That was perfect, but is it worth using cooldown? Actually, did they even commit in cooldowns? I think they used 1 stack of SEF from Mirrors, right? So they must have committed some form of cooldowns for killing that pack. That, of course, they don't have present on the boss. But by doing so, they, of course, do the safer version of the strategy, as you mentioned. We saw just how unsafe it is on Abrakeydabra side. Smok died. They fortunately have a second Battle Res class in that was able to get him up. Trothak's now at 52% versus Trothak's Method to use Trothak, which is at 80%. So they're, a fair bit ahead right now. Method is still behind by 3 deaths into a 15-second death difference, but they're slightly ahead on trash. We've talked about this before. Does that really matter, 4%, once you're getting over to Harlan with the Cannonball? Probably not, Zyro.
No, probably not. That's just going to be 1 or 2 more trash mobs that you cleave down with the Cannon Barrage from Harlan. So it's the 4% trash is not going to be that major of a difference. Zalia, whoa! Ooh. Running into the Shark Tornado there and almost going down. 1 more tick of that would have finished him off. He knew he was just out of range of the Shark, too, so that was a little bit of a spooky moment from him there, but just barely able to pull it out. And, of course, they did have the Battle Res available from Fraggy if he did end up going down there, so it wasn't, as close, but still, I mean, that should have been a death by all means, honestly.
It was honestly awesome to see him survive with that shot at so low percentage, but he did manage to squeeze away with that, and as a result, they are benefited with having their Battle Res available for the next 6 minutes. I honestly don't really think these teams will even get another Battle Res by the end of the dungeon, meaning that Abrakeydabra is going to go essentially hardcore mode into Harlan Suite at the end of the dungeon, because Trothak's about to fall here at 10%, so if anybody dies on Harlan, that's pretty much it for Abrakeydabra. They're going to have to commit to 4-manning the boss or trying and resetting him, and guess what? There's not really going to be anywhere to reset him because the entire boss is surrounded by trash and they skip it up on the side with Shadow Meld. So Trothak, 3% here for Abrakeydabra as they're getting ready to head over, and 40% for Method to use Zyro.
Yeah, not to mention, it's hard to reset Trothak in general because if you leave the arena during the boss encounter, the crowd throws food at you.
I was talking about Harlan.
Oh, you're talking about Harlan,
because Trothak's dead for them, so they're heading over to Harlan now, but even Harlan, there's nowhere to go. There's trash everywhere.
And there's nowhere to go for either boss. You can't reset either one really easily. So yeah, that's definitely the truth. We'll have to see. I mean, Abra, we kept talking about how well they deal with the Sanguine in this dungeon. This is it. This is the final test. They're ahead in the tournament. They've got to know this, and this is a huge moment for this team because we've been playing them up since March when the first Spring Cup started. This is their chance to get that tournament win that they've been looking for so long. And I mean, the nerves running through their mind right now, they've got to have a lot of... I can't imagine how they feel right now.
No, I can't imagine how they feel either, especially because a lot of them just ate the Void Emissaries AoE to the face. Now, they left a lot of the Ravagers in the background casting their Painful Motivation. I'm not sure if any of them actually died because they're still sitting at 73%. I believe they were 72, so I believe 1 mob died maybe. Nonetheless, everybody has successfully gone upstairs, no deaths on the board. They've Shadow Melded all of the aggro that they had off and immediately Bloodlusted on top of the pack, grabbing Harlan, and exactly what we saw them do earlier. Cannonball Barrage will only affect 1 of the 4 non-tank players at the beginning of the encounter up until 60%, so it's important to use that to your biggest advantage. Now, most of the mobs, because of the sheer damage of Cleave plus cooldowns plus Bloodlust, will kill most of the trash, but we still have these 2 Enforcers here.
Yeah, the 2 Enforcers are going to stay alive for a little bit longer than everything else, and you'll see Massive Healed for a little bit. That's going to leave an extra Sanguine pool not in the group where they originally had everything die instantly, but that's just a little bit of extra kiting for Divine Field, and you know what? He's used to that. I don't think it should be too much of an issue. You can see him even making sure he moves Harlan Suite even further away for his next cast sequence, just in case he does start doing one of those knockback attacks that he does. I forget I don't think he has a cast time, so I'm not quite sure what the name of it is. But that being said, he's just moving the boss further away, so there's no chance of the boss being in any of the sanguine that spawn from those enforcers.
Slicing Winds, I believe,
That's
is
what it
the one
is,
you're looking for, and it's very irritating. It actually can multi-hit you, so if you get hit once and charge back in right away, there's a good chance it'll strike you yet again. Method EU doing what they can to claw back here. I was going to say 9:45 on Bloodlust, but 25 seconds left on their Bloodlust right now, halfway through the Bloodlust as I keep speaking. Harlan Sweet here at 82%, and they too are pulling all of this trash. Same trash pack as Abrakeydabra, who is already well done with it and has now entered the second phase of the boss, where now all 4 non-tank members will be targeted by those cannonball barrages.
This is when you start feeling it in the pit of your stomach. Those butterflies start rising up. You only have really one more pressure point to get through in the dungeon, and it's, can you get this last trash pack with the cannon barrage, with no deaths, with no sanguine healing on the boss? This is the last thing they have to get through before they win this tournament. And honestly, Abrakeydabra, they haven't played the greatest this tournament. It's almost like Dr. J cast a spell that made the universe and the stars align so they would even have a chance of getting through this tournament. Here it is right now. Can the Cannon Barrage take everything out for them with no deaths? Can they get no healing on Harlan Sweet? And it looks like they've done it. They've got 93% trash. All they have left is the Ravager pack.
Yeah, well, I think
maybe a little bit more.
Yeah, maybe a little bit more, because I think one of the Ravagers died. We see the Emissary ties in here that was temporarily crowd controlled on the side as the pack died, and they're able to pull that in. As soon as Harlan Sweet tips over into that 30% rage, he'll just kind of plop over as he'll take 100% increased damage. So team fans out here in various directions just to drop the Cannonball Barrage and not risk any team death right now. Harlan Sweet finally hitting that final phase. You can see him cast the final loaded dice there. So he's going to be taking double damage as Zmock runs off screen right now in order to pull the rest of the trash. He's likely going to get one of the hits from the Shadow, the Void Emissary, but that won't finish him off.
Yeah, and he's pulling the Ravager pack. The Ravager should finish off the rest of the trash they need in this dungeon, and if not, they'll be able to just single target the trash down. Method EU is still at 51% on Harlan Sweet. Abrakeydabra, they just have to finish off this boss. He's taking double damage, sub 10%. They're at 99% trash. They just need to finish off one last trash mob when Harlan goes down.
Oh, that was a bit sloppy there. Gingy actually procced his cheat death, and Frag almost fell over too. One of the cannonballs went right in there. Zmock goes down here at the last second. The team gets hit by the Void Emissary as well. They still have 99% trash, but they're just going to pull up one of the Ravagers as Dr. J jumps down into action and is looking to they actually have to finish this mob off right now. A couple of them still have debuff. Okay, it did fade, so they should be able to kill this. Ooh. Nobody's dying, but if they get one more cast off, it might actually kill Ashine and Divine Field. Zmock's still running back right now. He's starting to run away. I don't know if he's going to be able to get far enough, though. They have to be really careful here, so he does get his second stack on Ashine. Swagfist gets his first one. Zmock's back, so he's able to heal them for the second stack, and I think they're going to be able to pull it off, but I mean, they got to finish this one with bells and whistles. No clean finish here for Abrakeydabra. That actually, for the first time, and for not just them, but for the first time ever, Method EU does not win a cup in perhaps what is the biggest slop fest I've seen in a while. I mean, that was just not clean, but it worked out.
They almost lost to Peyton for Femme. They almost lost to Method NA. Somehow Abrakeydabra is able to pull this. They almost lost to No Girls Allowed. Somehow Abrakeydabra, the stars have aligned. The serendipity has been cast onto their team, and they do take the win. And there was a messy road to get there.
Yeah, and it was messy for both teams. You actually saw Abrakeydabra and Method EU were pretty much neck and neck going into Sky Captain Crag. It was pretty good by them. Then Abrakeydabra decides that it's time to send your boss into a bloodbath, and Captain Rawl ends up healing to full. So that's actually very terrible. Abrakeydabra also had some issues on Trothak. Trothak ended up healing from Sanguine too whenever he was dashing towards those sawtooth sharks. So just positioning on the Sanguine was very bad for Abrakeydabra across the whole entire dungeon. But Method U just had a pretty much like a bigger mistake whenever they were doing their death skip. It ended up costing them. In Abrakeydabra towards the end of the dungeon, that was scary with that Void Emissary. That was actually pretty bad that they missed count there.
And I just want to speak to the mental fortitude of this team. They played 11 dungeons today, and they didn't. When you're playing not as, they weren't playing up to their standards at all. When you're playing that poorly, it's mental fatigue. You're like, oh man, I could have played that so much better. So I'm just really impressed with this team.
I want to say the same thing. Okay, go ahead.
Okay.
No.
Oh, yeah.
Zyro flagged down that he wanted to say that, and he flagged before I did. I wanted to say the exact same thing, so I'm not going to bother repeating it now, but I mean,
you should.
They have to be absolutely exhausted at this point, Abrakeydabra. And I mean, for them, it's probably, I'm sure they're happy they won, but it's probably a bit of a bittersweet win for them. I'm sure it's not exactly the fashion they wanted to win their first cup in, but a win is a win here, and congratulations to them for sure.
Yeah, without a doubt, congratulations to them. And let's take another closer look at that freehold run as well, Tettles.
Yeah, so Method EU, it was a total bloodbath. They decided that they wanted to pull some trash on top of the Council of Captains, which under most circumstances is pretty good. However, Jolly ends up getting Sanguine healed twice in this 20-second clip here. Basically, the Ring of Peace comes out just a little bit too late, so they end up having Sanguine spawning under Jolly while he's casting. And then it looked like somebody they ended up killing some of these mobs again, and then Jolly starts standing in the Sanguine, healing more. Because Eudora, whenever it's a Eudora friendly week, Eudora will randomly like shoot targets and like stun them. So I guess Jolly may have just gotten stunned twice inside of that Sanguine, so that was actually pretty bad for them.
Yeah, that was very nasty indeed, and you hate to see it. But Abrakeydabra, unfortunate as it was in the circumstances, they do take that win over Method EU. This is, again, the first time they have been handed a win themselves, and to their credit, Zmok has been improving and getting very well synergized with the rest of the team onto this one. Ironic.
Yeah, it's really impressive, especially after the way they went down in the 2 weeks ago in the first cup. Zmok had some, pretty upsetting spot deaths for the team, and as a new healer into the team, like, he really had to impress. Now, of course, they did get their best finish ever in that second place, so nobody was upset with him too much. But it's just awesome to see him specifically clean up his play this week. And that being said, the whole team didn't look that great, but they managed to pull it out.
They managed to pull it out and get a sweet pot of points as a result. So that 210 points is going to be secured by Abrakeydabra, Method EU with the 150, and Method NA to follow with that 120. So those three teams are all secure for BlizzCon. It's important to note for our overall standings in this regard. 40K with that 250 points, but No Girls Allowed isn't too far behind. And I believe, as we mentioned previously here, Tettles, No Girls Allowed is going to need to pull up big in that final week to get that BlizzCon spot.
Yeah, so they need 40K to stop laughing. They need 40K to have a 7th, 8th place finish, and then No Girls Allowed also needs to have a 3rd place finish next week for them to be able to qualify for BlizzCon over 40K. So they need a little bit of help from 40K as well.
They're going to need some of that Dr. J magic to be able to make it happen, Salute.
Yeah, I mean, well, I don't know if they want I don't know if they want that magic from today, but maybe some of the other magic. 40K is probably feeling a lot of pressure at this point. They're just, I'm sure they're not happy with how they performed in the past 2 cups, but now it's starting to perhaps sink in the reality that, hey, we actually might not go to BlizzCon if we have another performance like we did this week. So hopefully, they only really need to minorly step it up just to make sure that they qualify. So hopefully they bring a bit better game next time, 2 weeks from now.
Hope so as well. But I really hope that people bring their game day next week, because it's going to be my birthday on Friday, so you all better be tuning in. It's going to be Friday at 10 p.m. Eastern. It's going to be a great birthday party, August 30th, where we get to see what Eastern Cup number 2. Make sure you book your tickets, have a laugh with some good old friends, and we get to check out more Mythic Dungeon International action, as we'll see the best in the East as they compete to secure their points for BlizzCon. Thank you so much for joining us for the Western Cup number 2 of the Mythic Dungeon International. We'll see you next week.